money was backed by, or US dollar was backed by gold, right? So you can take $20 bill, go to the bank and say I want an ounce of gold, and they'll give you gold for that. But once that got unlinked, it became fiat currency. So it's valuable because the government says it's valuable, and the government forces you to pay tax in dollar bills or in dollar. So that makes it valuable. So now that we kind of know like what gives anything value, what actually gives Bitcoin value? Who here knows what gives Bitcoin value? Who's actually thought about what gives Bitcoin value? So a few of you, but actually most of you probably don't even think about like what actually gives Bitcoin value. Right? Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or Litecoin cryptocurrency, it doesn't actually, it's not physical. So you can't say it's pretty, you want Bitcoin because it's pretty. You can't actually really own Bitcoin. If you dig down to the details of the blockchain, the Bitcoin is actually just out there on the blockchain. It's kind of like in a database. All you have is a private key that lets you send that Bitcoin, gives you access to move that Bitcoin to another address owned by someone else, or in which someone else owns the private key for that address. So you don't really own Bitcoin either. So what actually gives Bitcoin value? So I'm here today to try to kind of explain that. It's actually like the sound money properties of Bitcoin that gives it value. That's why people call Bitcoin like digital gold. Right? The reason why gold is valuable is not just because it's pretty, it's also because it's a good form of money. So let me talk today about 4 properties of Bitcoin that gives it value. 1, censorship resistant. 2, transaction immutability. 3, its cost of production. And 4, the fixed money supply. So let's start with censorship resistance. People actually don't think about what that actually means. What does it mean for money to be censorship resistant? I'm sure most of you actually never had an issue with this. Right? You spend money, there's no one's there to say you can't spend money until it actually happens to you. So let me give you an example of what happened. In April 15 of 2011, something called Poker Black Friday. Who's actually heard of or experienced and know anything about Poker Black Friday? So what happened was online poker was a booming industry. Millions of people were playing online, and the government decided that that's illegal. I think Las Vegas probably had a lot to do with that, lobbying against online poker. On April 15, 2011, 3 major poker sites were shut down, bank accounts were seized. But the real important thing was that the government made it so that all credit card payments, bank payments, and payment processors to these online sites were blocked. Right? All they had to do is just talk to these centralized companies to say, this is illegal, please block all these payments or reverse them if it happens. And that effectively censored online poker, at least for US citizens. Right? So there are sites that are outside this country that are doing online poker, but there's no way for you to send money to them to play poker. So poker to most people, or poker is actually a game of skill. Right? It's not gambling, you're playing with people, it's your money, so why can't you spend your money to play a game of skill with someone else online? And that's what Bitcoin brings back, right? It's censorship resistant money, it's your money, you can do whatever you want with it. And no one can actually block you. Whereas with fiat currency, the government can just say, just block payments. So Bitcoin is censorship resistant money. It's not controlled by government, it's not controlled by companies. It's what I call freedom of money, right? The internet brought us freedom of information. Cryptocurrency is bringing us freedom of money. It's your money, it's your right. And so Bitcoin cannot be blocked from spending. And that's actually very powerful. Let's move on to the next point. So second point is transaction immutability. What does that mean? It means that if I send you money, it cannot be reversed. Right now, with traditional payment methods, if I send you an ACH, if I send you credit card payments, or even if I send you wire payment, it can be reversed. Right? ACH is like 6 months or something. They have 6 months of time to say this is a fraudulent payment, reverse it, and the bank will reverse it. And then after you got payment, a week later, your payment can be pulled back by credit card companies or banks or not. So with Bitcoin, transaction is immutable. And this is due to the blockchain design and proof of work. There's a little bit of detail on my slide, but what it actually means is that once a transaction is in a block, in order to undo it, you have to create a competing block. So miners actually have to spend resources, spend a lot of money to reverse a transaction. And if a transaction is like 6 blocks deep, you have to create a chain that is alternative chain starting for when the transaction is created to undo that transaction. So it becomes prohibitively expensive to undo any transaction. And because of the decentralized nature of Bitcoin, it's practically not possible to reverse a transaction. And I made a tweet about this a while back. The way I think about proof of work is that you're burying the transaction deep underground, and each new block basically pushes the transaction deeper. So in order to actually get to that transaction, you have to dig that deep into the ground to actually pull everything back up and undo it. So that's why if a transaction has 6 confirmations, it's pretty much like set in stone. If it's from like a day ago or from like a month ago, it's good, right? You can't reverse it. It just takes too much power, too much energy, too much cost to undo a transaction. So Bitcoin transactions cannot be reversed, and because of that, Bitcoins cannot be taken away from you, right? Once you receive the coins, it's yours. No one can take it away from you unless you give them access, you give them back, or you get your private key stolen. But that's another story. Third properties of Bitcoin, cost of production. So by cost of production, I mean that it's easy to detect fake Bitcoins, right? So Bitcoins, when you send Bitcoins, it's on the block explorer. If you're running a full node, you actually can verify the Bitcoins that you received are real Bitcoins. Right? So for example, something that happens recently these days is with all these Bitcoin forks, sometimes someone say, I said Bitcoin, and then someone sends you Bitcoin Cash, or another fork of Bitcoin, and you won't be deceived because you can just check the Bitcoin block explorer and see that, hey, you didn't actually send me Bitcoin, you sent me counterfeit Bitcoins. Second point is, you just can't create extra Bitcoins kind of out of thin air, right? With cryptography and the enforcement like code, each block right now can only create 12.5 Bitcoins. And it's set, right? Every 4 years that gets halved. And that's just something that you can't change. So if a miner decided to create 13 Bitcoins out of a block, that block will be rejected by a network and it'll be orphaned, and it just can't happen. And then also, third point is that the cost of 1 Bitcoin is non-zero, right? So with proof of work and competitive mining, it costs money to create a Bitcoin. So, I mean, if it doesn't cost anything, then you just can't create as many as you want. So because it costs money in all these properties, Bitcoin cannot be counterfeited. And that's really valuable, right? With other currencies, it's quite easy to counterfeit it, but not so with Bitcoin. The last property of Bitcoin I want to talk about is the fixed money supply. So the US money supply is, if you look at a chart, this is the end figure for the United States, it's increasing exponentially. It's not just like increasing linearly, it's actually increasing exponentially over time. Like if you have $100 worth of something from like 100 years ago, it's only worth $6 today, right? It's been devalued like tremendously over time. And the government, or the Federal Reserve, which is not even a government body, puts out fancy names that makes it sound good, like quantitative easy. But what they actually do is just printing money and devaluing everyone's currency, devaluing everyone's money. And this is something that can't happen with Bitcoin, because the schedule for Bitcoin's inflation is set in the code. So it's known ahead of time. Over time, we'll reach 21 million total Bitcoins, and there can't ever be more than that. And it cannot be changed without consensus. So everyone has to agree to change it. And from what I can tell, that's not going to happen. Like, people like Bitcoin's fixed supply. you're not going to get everyone to agree to actually increase that. And if miners want to increase that to make more money, it's going to get rejected by the network and the community. So Bitcoin cannot be devalued. So in summary, these are the 4 properties that I want to talk about of Bitcoin: censorship resistant, transaction immutability, cost production, fixed money supply. So censorship resistant, what does it mean? It means that Bitcoin cannot be blocked from spending. With transaction immutability, means that it cannot be reversed or taken away. Cost of production means that it cannot be counterfeited, and with a fixed money supply, it means that it cannot be devalued. So if you have money that has these properties, cannot be blocked from spending, cannot be reversed or taken away, cannot be counterfeited, and cannot be devalued, that's actually really, really valuable, right? It's something that we actually don't have right now before Bitcoin. It's something that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general brought about and created. It's a new form of money that is very, very valuable because of these 4 properties. And that's why Bitcoin is sound money, and that's what actually gives it value. Right? It's the fact that you have Bitcoin in your wallet, you can spend it without anyone saying no, right? No one can take the Bitcoin away from you, no one can counterfeit more Bitcoins, and it can't be devalued. That's extremely valuable, and that's something that people actually don't think about. So that's why, I think of Bitcoin as like the honey badger of money, right? It's just really resistant and really valuable, and nobody can actually devalue it or make it less valuable. So next I want to talk about how to defend Bitcoin's sound money properties. Right? So censorship resistant. An attack would be government pressuring miners and pools to censor transactions. Right? So if all the miners and all the pools decide that this transaction is sending money to a terrorist group or to anything that the government thinks it's not good, and the government pressures these miners and pools to block this transaction, you can effectively censor the transaction, right? If none of the miners or pools pick up this transaction and put it on the blockchain, then it'll be censored. So what's the defense? The defense is that miners are centralized, right? So anyone can mine, you just have to have enough money to buy equipment and have low energy costs and you can mine. And also miners are in different jurisdictions. It's true that there's a lot of miners in China, for example, today, but there's still miners elsewhere, right? If China government decides to force all the Chinese miners to block a certain transaction, the other miners outside China can still find a block, and once it's in the blockchain, you can't reverse it, right? So that's why censorship resistant, the attack is, the defense against that, against censoring transaction is just because that miners are decentralized and are in different jurisdictions. Transaction immutability. The attack is like a 51% attack to reverse a transaction. All right, so a transaction is in a blockchain. If you have 51% of the mining hash rate, you can build a block from before the transaction happened and do a double spend and reverse that transaction. So the defense is very similar. It's because miners are decentralized. It's hard for you to get 51% of the attacking power to reverse a transaction. Right? It's actually very cost prohibitive to acquire 50% of the Bitcoin hash rate. I think the largest mining farm only owns like a percent, even less than that. Like I said, the proof of work makes the attack costly. And then lastly, there's no incentive to attack. Miners are making money by mining blocks. If they attack the network, there's definitely a chance of them failing. If they fail, then they're just wasting their money doing the attack. Third thing, cost of production. The attack is like if SHA-256 mining is broken, if you can just create a lot of, like if it costs nothing to create Bitcoins, the defense against that is no decentralization, right? Something like, I don't know if you guys have heard of like the UASF movement last year. In the end, the users actually have control of the network. The miners can attack Bitcoin, but if the users decide that the miners are attacking, they can hard fork to fix it, right? They can fix the broken mining algorithm by changing it to a different proof of work. And whatever problem that happens, people can come together and fix it. So node decentralization is very important. Like people running nodes all over the world have control over the network. And the last property is the fixed money supply, right? So the attack would be miners colluding to increase the block rewards. We've actually seen that before, where when the block rewards for Bitcoin went from 50 to 25, some of the miners decided that they want to keep it at 50. So they actually tried to produce blocks. I think they managed to produce a few blocks with the reward still at 50. But the thing is, no one else agreed with that change, right? So because of decentralization, we'll just ignore the invalid block that the miners create. So if in the future, if the miners say they want to increase the block rewards because they're not making enough money, that will be blocked because users are running nodes, the nodes are decentralized, and with something like UASF, or even just keeping running the same code, you will block a miner attack, and a hard fork would be rejected. So if you look at this, what actually sticks out is the word decentralization, right? So decentralization is actually what gives Bitcoin value. It's what actually makes Bitcoin's sound money properties defensible, right? It's what actually keeps Bitcoin as sound money. So, and that's something that people don't actually think about. A lot of these new projects, they're talking about like decentralization. It's good because it's decentralized, but you don't actually think about why you want something to be decentralized, right? Why do you want this new project or this new blockchain to be decentralized? And I argue it's because decentralization gives us censorship resistant, immutability, can be counterfeited, right? These properties is what decentralization gives you. If you don't care about these properties, decentralization doesn't really help you. It's actually inefficient to be decentralized, where you have 1,000 or 10,000 nodes doing the same thing over and over again to be decentralized. It's definitely a lot less efficient than Visa, for example, who has like one big server that handles thousands of transactions per second. So now I want to talk about how these sound money properties apply to the altcoins, for example. So as you know, I created Litecoin. So my focus for Litecoin I didn't create Bitcoin, by the way, so that's someone else. So with Litecoin, the reason why I follow like Bitcoin very closely is because I realized what actually Bitcoin value is the sound money properties. So a lot of coins, other coins actually unknowingly like change some of the properties in which destroys the value of sound, or destroys the sound money properties and makes it not valuable, and they don't even realize it. So by keeping close to Bitcoin, Litecoin also has these sound money properties. It's censorship resistant, it's immutable, there's a cost to produce, it's less than Bitcoin but still expensive, and there's a fixed money supply. For Litecoin, it's 84 million Litecoins at the end. And Litecoin is protected by a different set of miners than Bitcoin. So Litecoin miners have incentive to protect Litecoin, which gives it value, and there's no way for Bitcoin miners to attack Litecoin and vice versa. So Litecoin has all these properties of sound money. Well, how about Ethereum? Right, Ethereum is very valuable, but there's some problems with Ethereum's sound money properties. I don't see Ethereum as real sound money. It's more like a utility coin, right? So Ethereum is censorship resistant, but we've experienced that it doesn't have transaction immutability. Right? With the DAO hard fork a few years ago, someone hacked the DAO, took the coins. It was it's the code, right? People talk about code as law. They followed the codes. It was bugging the code, but the Ethereum community came together and reversed that transaction, right? It was a little bit more centralized than Bitcoin and Litecoin. They came together to reverse the transaction. So with the DAO hard fork, it proves to me that Ethereum is not immutable. In the future, if something big happens, it can happen again. The cost of production, Ethereum is moving to proof of stake. which would kill kind of that argument because it won't be expensive to produce. And then with the fixed money supply, a month ago, or maybe it was a few weeks ago, the Ethereum developer community came together and decided to reduce the block reward from 3 ETH to 2 ETH. So the Ethereum money supply changes over time. So we don't really know what the final number of ETH will be created. It actually will be infinite, right? Currently, there is no set limit. So because of that, it's not really sound money. Right? I want money where I know the supply and no one can arbitrarily change the supply. Effectively, this is what the Ethereum developers did a few weeks ago, which is just to change the future supply of ETH. And that's just not good for sound money. Lastly, everyone's favorite Bitcoin. Who loves Bitcoin Cash? Who hates Bcash? Okay, well, I won't give you my opinion. So, with Bitcoin Cash, there's actually quite a few problems that I've seen. The censorship resistant part. Bitcoin Cash has 6% of the total SHA-256 hashing power of Bitcoin, right? So a small mining pool of Bitcoin can actually attack Bitcoin Cash and censor all transactions. So it's actually very easy for something like this to happen if they have an incentive. So what's the incentive? The incentive would be if they want to short Bitcoin Cash on an exchange and then just attack it and kill it. You can actually quite easily kill Bitcoin Cash because if you have 51% of the hashing power, you can mine empty blocks and basically censor every single Bitcoin Cash transaction from now forward. And when a pool does that, everyone else who's mining Bitcoin Cash would have their blocks orphaned, and they would just stop mining Bitcoin Cash because they wouldn't be able to make money from mining Bitcoin Cash. They'll go back to mining Bitcoin, which makes them money, and then effectively you just kill Bitcoin Cash, and they would have to hard fork or whatever to undo that. And because Bitcoin Cash has the same mining algorithm as Bitcoin, this is a very viable attack. And that's also why when I created Litecoin 7 years ago, I made sure I didn't have the same mining algorithm as Bitcoin, because I don't want to compete with Bitcoin for hash rate. Because when you compete with the king, it's just stupid. Transaction immutability. There's a website, fork.lol, that shows you that it takes 20 days of the SHA-256 hashing power to rewrite all of Bitcoin Cash, starting from when it forked last year, to basically create all the blocks. It only takes 20 days to basically write Bitcoin Cash out of the history books, so to speak. So transactions are definitely not immutable on Bitcoin Cash. Cost of production. One of the reasons why SegWit was kind of blocked last year was because of something called ASIC boost. We believe that some miners were doing this thing called covert ASIC boost behind the scene. No one knows, and they're actually mining coins at a lot cheaper electricity, a lot more efficiently than everyone else. And they're basically creating, making bank with it. And that's why they were against SegWit and tried to block it. So with Bitcoin, SegWit activated, you can't do covert ASIC boost anymore. But with Bitcoin Cash, there's no SegWit, so people are still doing covert ASIC boost, I believe. You can't really tell. And they're basically creating Bitcoin Cash for a lot cheaper than everyone else. And then lastly, with fixed money supply. The reason why Bitcoin Cash doesn't have that, even though right now it's just like Bitcoin, with 21 million total Bitcoin Cash that will ever be created. The problem is, Bitcoin Cash believes that miners have control. Users running nodes can't do anything. So if miners have control, when the time comes that miners aren't making enough money, they will propose to increase the block rewards, and there will be no one there to stop them, because there aren't no decentralization. And that's going to be a big problem in the future. We haven't seen that yet, but I believe we will. So in conclusion, believe Bitcoin and Litecoin have sound money properties. Cannot be blocked from spending, cannot be reversed or taken away, cannot be counterfeited, and cannot be devalued. And in the end, it's actually decentralization. is what gives cryptocurrency value. And without decentralization, a cryptocurrency will not sustain long-term value. And that's why I fight very hard for decentralization. Right? When last year with like the UASF movement and the Segway 2X, we just want to make sure that people fight to keep blocks small is because with a smaller block, more people can run nodes and it keeps Bitcoin decentralized. Right? If you let the blocks grow as large as you can, all of a sudden you can't run a node. For example, it's really hard for me to run an Ethereum node. It's actually really hard for anyone to run an Ethereum node today. And that's the same thing what happened with Bitcoin Cash. When blocks are at 100 gigabytes a block, you just can't keep up. And only the large data centers, the large miners, and large companies can run nodes. And before you know it, it's not decentralized anymore. And then it's not valuable because of that. So I'll end with that. Thank you.